CNN is learning that Donald Trump's oldest son texted then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows some ideas for overturning the election. This is before the election was called. He wrote, quote, "We have operational control to ensure his father would get a second term."
Donald Trump Jr. lays out a number of operational legal strategies that the Trump campaign and Republican operatives across the country would then go on to employ. And I'll just give you an example of some of the things that Donald Trump Jr. suggested that they should pursue. Creating an alternate slate of fake electors. That was one of his suggestions in this text message. This is something that we know that Rudy Giuliani and those close to the Trump administration attempted to employ. He also talked about pushing the vote back to the state legislatures. We also know this was a legal theory that Trump and his allies were attempting to pursue. And he also talked about forcing a scenario where neither candidate had enough electoral votes to win, leaving it to the House to vote by state delegation to elect a president. Again, another legal theory floated by the Trump campaign.
As CNN was reporting there, Donald Trump Jr., his text messages have been uncovered that he was sending to Mark Meadows, former chief of staff of former President Trump at the time, right after the election. That's a big part about this, because they did point out the things that he was outlining of ways that they could make sure they keep Donald Trump in office. We saw them employ those ways, but the difference here is the timing. Here's more from CNN about the timing and how damning that was.
The single most damning fact about this text is the date, November 5th, 2 days after Election Day, while the votes were still being counted, before anybody had called the election for Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And the reason that's so important is because it takes away this argument that we've heard from some of the people around Donald Trump. Well, he really thought he had won. This was just a good faith effort to go through the legal processes to try to vindicate an election that he truly believed he had won. There's no possible way on November 5th, Donald Trump would have believed or could have reasonably believed he won. He didn't know who won. And even if they did have some evidence of election fraud, which none as such ever existed, they would not possibly have had it on November 5th. So it really goes right to the heart of the intent behind this scheme to steal the election.
That is the big news there as far as this goes. 2 days after the election, when no winner had been declared yet. It's part of what Donald Trump was complaining about. How can we have all this vote counting before and after the election? It should all happen just on election day, is what his complaint was, which highlights that they knew there was no winner yet. So how could you be planning how you can keep Donald Trump in office with all these extra tactics? And you're saying because he was forced out and cheated and lost, if you didn't even know he lost yet. You would think you would still think you won since it was such a landslide. No, that's not the way this works. There's more damning language that Trump Jr. did also put in these texts. Let's look at these. It's very simple, is what Trump Jr. texted to Meadows on November 5th, adding later in the same missive, "We have multiple paths." This is the big part. "We control them all." So as they're still in office, I mean, technically, as they're still there until at least January comes about, they still have control. We can still control things. We can do whatever we want because we're in the White House, right? Continuing on, "We have operational control, total leverage," is what the message reached. "Moral high ground, POTUS must start second term now." And immediately before his text to Meadows describing multiple paths for challenging the election, Trump Jr. texted Meadows the following: "This is what we need to do. Please read it and please get it to everyone that needs to see it, because I'm not sure we're doing it." So outside of all the things about how we have the operational control right now, since we're still in office, we can do whatever we want. Do it now. On top of that, he says, make sure you tell everyone. So this is, I think it's David. I think it's getting rid of all of the gray area of saying, well, I didn't know because Trump likes to do that. Senior likes to do a lot. Well, I just said it. I don't know. I mean, I don't really know. Maybe, sorta. This is explicit.
Well, I mean, look, it's remarkable that here he is using the word operational control. Donald Trump Jr. is talking about operational control. That's such an amateurish word for anybody to use who doesn't really know what the hell they're talking about. And clearly, I mean, look, sometimes I go back and forth between, is it Eric Trump is the stupid one? Is it Donald Trump Jr. is the dumb one? Usually I think it's Eric Trump, that maybe it's just Donald Trump is sort of the more vile, repulsive one. This is a guy who, look, there are legitimate questions, I suppose, about whether he's addicted to certain sort of drugs because of his television appearances. The fact that he is, right after the election, before anybody knows who won, that he's already talked about operational control and how we can sort of win this thing. Again, it gets to this idea that there was an effort from the beginning by Donald Trump, by a bunch of amateurs, to defraud the US government of a fair and free election. That was their goal. And I suppose we should consider ourselves lucky that it was a bunch of morons and idiots like the Trump family that was behind this, and not somebody who might have posed a more serious threat.
It's really the luckiest part, because as they were saying, they just, they didn't care about how blatant and obvious this was, but it was just like, we're the Trumps. It's almost the pompous approach and the Teflon past that they always have kind of, well, we'll see, could do them in, but that's also getting questioned as well as things go down in New York out there. I want to jump down just to graphic 6, you guys, because of those operational things that he was saying, or of those agendas that they were saying they were pushing to do this, the one about forcing that there was no winner in the Electoral College and sending it back to the House to vote on it. Let's go to what he was saying about that. This is Junior again. He said Republicans control 28 states, Democrats 22 states. Once again, Trump wins. We either have a vote we control and we win, or it gets kicked back to Congress 6 January 2021. Again, the basis behind what he thinks the democracy is in America is Republicans control 28 states and Democrats control 22 in the House, in Congress. Then after that, we can use that power then to do whatever the hell we want. That is the freedom-loving America First party that you see in front of you now.
Yeah, it was that whole sort of game that some annoying kids would play where you flip a coin and tails I win, heads you lose, or heads I win, tails you lose. And it's like, wait a second. And that's how Don Jr. approached the election. I mean, they were sort of confident they would win the election. If they didn't win the election, all right, they just gum it up enough to sure. There is a process in the Constitution whereby it gets kicked over to the US House, but that's not something that is that we should aspire to. That's not something we should actively plan for. That's not something you should hope for. I mean, that's a disaster.
Yeah, well, that's what they appear to like, because that's what they've been trying to do to the country.